Great. So this is weekly discussion event number 15, or 50, sorry, big 50, big week. And the topic for this week is spending money to make money. And this was inspired by a post that Laura Bushak, the philosopher, had on our Facebook group a couple weeks ago. And it was a very thought-provoking question. So let's explore this idea, especially how it revolves around our giving and budgeting around generous giving. So as always, what is EA? I just want to summarize it real quick. Of course, we're talking about an idea and a community here, focused on using evidence and careful reasoning to figure out the very best ways to improve the world, and then acting on that basis. And our group is the Christian group. We're a global community of Christians who are committed to serving others as well as possible, drawing on ideas from effective altruism, and we inspire and equip others to do likewise. So I want to start out with a somewhat familiar story, but I'm going to retell it a bit differently. Let's just say John Wesley wants to make a giving pledge. So he looks at how much he has and he considers and prays to God about how much he should keep. And he decides to limit his income to 7,000 Great Britain pounds per year. And fun fact, John Wesley actually did limit his income to about 30 pounds per year, which if you account for 250 years of inflation is about 7,000 today. So this story isn't too far off from history. So by the end of year one, his collective savings bring him enough to fund one orphanage and school in East Africa. And by the start of the second year, Wesley considers, well, what if instead of just limiting my income at a lower amount, I invest in myself and I outsource tasks. Let's say I hire a maid and to do some housework, and I also go back to school, or I learn how to be a better public speaker so that I can earn more and do more good with that. And lo and behold, after the end of the second year, Wesley has enough to fund 2 orphanages with all the extra increase that he had from his work. So John Wesley asked himself this question, can it be good to spend money to make more money, which I can then use for good purposes? And he thinks to himself, yes, absolutely. We're off to a good start here. So in the beginning of year 3, Wesley goes wild with rampant investments in self-potential. He sets very little or no cap on his income at first, and continues his education, but also focuses to a very large degree on his personal feelings and feelings of regeneration. He takes long vacations in the tropics, and even invests in a mansion for himself where he can talk to peers about his work and maybe have a network effect, connecting with high network individuals and so forth. Really goes home with this idea. And let's say by the end of year 3, maybe he does do just as much good for orphanages as at the end of year 2. But we can imagine some kind of hidden harm from this, where people look at John Wesley and they see how much he's spending on himself and how extravagantly he's living. And the end result is that actually less orphanages are funded, because there are no Christian effective altruists today who remember John Wesley, who set a good example of limiting his income, or maybe there's a public scandal of how much this pastor spent on expenditures, or you can get creative with the situation. But the takeaway here, there's several takeaways from this story. I think the first is that this idea of spending more on yourself to be more productive, to be in a better health, better state of health, mentally, physically, these are good things, right? And they can be very good. So you think of education, you think of investing in a laptop that's fast enough to do work. You think of outsourcing tasks like daycare, or whatever isn't your comparative advantage, or just is too much time right now, or maybe even the morning coffee, if that's really psychologically important for you for being productive. spending more on yourself can be better. I think this story gives us a short clue into that. But the second takeaway from the story is that there's no obvious optimum of frugality. So I think most of us would wish that we spent less money on ourselves than we really do. At least I feel that way. And we can maybe look out on society and think, well, it would be lovely if we lived in a world where more people in wealthy countries, more well-to-do people, did choose to limit their income to support really high impact charities. And some people will say there is actually an optimum, and that optimum might be where you limit your income so much that your income is as low as, I guess, the person who's suffering the most in the world who you can help. And there's some Peter Singer arguments around this. But then you still run into this problem where if you were to limit your income that much, it might be the case where you actually couldn't earn any more money because you would be so, you'd be in such a in such a mess where if you're not taking care of yourself, you can't take care of others. So I guess theoretically there is an optimum level of frugality, but there's no obvious optimum, and this is something that's very tricky. And the third takeaway is that we need to consider how we model for others. So if we're considering a giving pledge, or we want to be generous with our giving, we should consider what our pledges not just mean for us, but what they also mean for other people. If it is true that by convincing other people to give more effectively, we can effectively multiply our impact, we have to consider how other people view our decisions. So there's a lot of directions we could go with this concept. I want to just name a few questions here that we can discuss. And the first is that what are trade-offs between different kinds of pledges, keeping this idea of making money or spending money to make money in mind. So one kind of giving pledge is this idea of a maximum expense. You can imagine someone saying, oh, I'm going to limit my income at 30,000 Great Britain pounds per year. I think that's what William McCaskill shows. And everything above that, I'm going to give away. And that has a certain elegance to it and a simplicity to it. It also has some disadvantages, right? Let's talk about those and what are the trade-offs between that and maybe a simple percentage pledge, like I'm going to give 10% away to effective charities and so forth. Or maybe some other kinds of pledges, like a progressive pledging. We think of progressive taxation, kind of taxation on a scale. Maybe giving could go a similar direction. And when we discuss these in groups, let's try to be mindful not to ask people or expect of people that they are currently giving or they currently have this all figured out. Let's think about this in a collaborative way and try to encourage and inspire other people to figure this out and to make more generous and more healthy pledges. So the second question we can explore in breakout rooms is, could a suboptimal pledge be better for other reasons? Maybe for your own mental health, maybe for consistency or sustainability. Maybe in your head you have a certain number that you're fixed to and that makes much more sense for you. Or maybe there are signaling or network effects where you might want to make a pledge that's less than you could give, but it's more attractive to other people. I think of the choice to go vegetarian or vegan as kind of one of these situations where environmentalists will say it's better to be vegan to be vegetarian, but sociologists will tell you that people actually respond better to arguments for vegetarianism than arguments for veganism, because vegans come across as more moralistic. So maybe there's a kind of pledge that is less moralistic and more encouraging and approachable for other people. And then finally, how can we be honest with ourselves when we're making pledges and we're also spending money on ourselves? How can we not get carried away with it, but at the same time not neglect things that we really need and that would really help us to be happy and fulfilled ourselves and to help other people be happy and fulfilled?